The mission includes, so it was deployed on the 30th of April. It includes 12 experts in the capital and 18 long-term observer teams that were deployed throughout the country in groups of two. We had 100 The voting was observed in 512 police stations across the country, and the counting was observed in 46 polling stations, 43 local election commissions. I'm planning now to read out the introductory paragraph of our statement on preliminary findings and conclusions, which gives you the general flavor of our assessment of these elections, and then I will run through a little bit more in detail some of the key points that of our findings. So the 2nd of June local elections were well administered, offering voters a wide range of political alternatives, but concerns about widespread pressure on public sector employees, misuse of public resources, contestants could The legal framework provides an adequate basis for the conduct of democratic elections. However, further reforms are needed to address outstanding recommendations. Despite measures introduced to address concerns over alleged organized voter migration in previous elections, which contributed to reducing tensions in the run-up to these elections, many stakeholders consider these register. The diverse media landscape is highly polarized, provided selective coverage, limiting the amount of essential information on local elections available to voters. Of intimidation against journalists were of issues in class. We said the effective dispute resolution process remain unaddressed. On the positive side, we note that the parliamentary working group, which includes representatives from both the ruling and the opposition parties and from the civil society, this was established with the stated aim of addressing previous ODIHR recommendations. It held several meetings, but did not to take any decisions in relation to the current elections. For that reason, we consider it important that this working group continues operating, and environment engage in good faith in this work. And certainly for his part, the ODIHR, which has been for a long time already engaged in assisting Serbia, as it does also in a number of other countries of the region, will continue support for this working group for their important work ahead. Some 2.21 million voters were eligible to vote in these elections. Many of our interlocutors expressed, however, a general allegations of voters either deceased or in doubt the accuracy of this register. The recent amending the law on the unified voter register produced the need to amend the voters' lists in a very shortened time frame. The Ministry of Public Administration and Local Self-Government had agreed to give the parliamentary working group the possibility to monitor the implementation of this amendment. However, the conditions provided by the Ministry for this verification did not allow for meaningful scrutiny, and this didn't help in terms of trust in the voters' lists. Now, local election commissions registered a total of 400 and was negatively impacted by concerns of confidentiality, accessing to the recent amendments. While freedom of expression and assembly were respected, there were widespread allegations of pressure ability to make pressure. The legal framework contains some shortcomings. There are long-standing ODIHR recommendations which remain for the test. So also some of these shortcomings and the limited enforcement of the regulatory framework diminish transparency and accountability of campaign finances and undermine the notion of a level playing field. The media environment is marked by systemic challenges to media freedom, including political and economic influences, which hinders content diversity. Long-standing concerns in the media area include threats, intimidation of journalists, strategic lawsuits against investigative journalists, impunity for crimes against them, media ownership concentration, and inconsistent legislation enforcement. The monitoring mission, the observers, noted that the media prioritized national agenda over local issues during the campaign, depriving voters of essential information on local election. Public service media primarily focused on president, government, ruling parties, granting access to representatives of the opposition on local issues only in the last 10 days before the election. the REM, the Regulatory Authority for Electronic Media, issued a rule books for election media coverage, entered into force less than 2 weeks before the campaign silence. On the positive side, this time the rule book applied to all media, not only to the public ones. National minorities, the Constitution recognized national minorities, foresees special measures to ensure the political participation and representation, which is obviously a very positive element. However, there is a lack of a clear and objective criteria for the election commissions to determine whether a candidate list actually represents a national minority. So that's something that also needs to be looked into and improved. Now, on dispute resolution, the law provides for expedite steps to resolve disputes, but additional safeguards are needed to ensure full access to effective remedy. The REC maintained a database of complaints filed with LEC and the courts, contributing to transparency. Prior to election day, 108 complaints had been uploaded on this website, most related to the registration of candidates. 30 cases were dismissed on technical grounds, 20 complaints were upheld. Remaining cases were rejected as unsubstantiated or are still pending. Out of 28 appeals to higher courts, 19 upheld elect decisions, and in 2 cases were overturned. Now, the election day proceeded smoothly overall, and I'm looking at the country as a whole, but was negatively affected by issues related to secrecy of the vote, numerous procedural problems, claims of pressure and vote buying, and isolated instances of violence. Our observers assessed voting negatively in 7% of the polling stations observed. And we are talking about the ones we observed, of course. Attributed to frequent breaches of the secrecy of the vote, including due to the layout of the polling stations. They also noticed several instances of serious irregularities, including cases of vote buying and pressure on voters, as well as procedural shortcomings, including group voting and proxy voting. The counting process was negatively assessed in 10 of the 46 counts that we have observed, mainly due to lack of adherence to prescribed procedures. Tabulation, on the other hand, was assessed positively in all but 3 observations, with negative assessments attributed mainly to lack of transparency and often as a result of the layout of the tabulation premises. The law provides for citizen and international observations. I gave you the figures for our own observation mission. We've seen that the Center for Research, Transparency and Accountability, CERTA, observed the Belgrade City Assembly election, and it says it deployed observers to Belgrade, Niš, and Novi Sad. So I will leave it at this in terms of general statement. You will receive a written copy of this shortly. But before concluding, I would like to express, on behalf of the whole mission and of the ODIHR, the authorities for the invitation to observe the election, the Minister of Foreign Affairs for their assistance, the local election commissions around the country for providing the accreditation documents and the support and the assistance throughout. We would like also to express appreciation to the other state institutions, political parties, candidates, media, civil society organizations, and international community representatives for their cooperation. As you can imagine, we had hundreds of meetings with all sorts of institutional interlocutors at all levels in Belgrade, centrally, and across the country. And finally, I would like to thank my own staff, beginning with my deputy next to me and the very able colleagues that supported me during this period. the long-term observers, the short-term observers, and the local staff, which proved to be key in allowing us to perform an efficient job in observing these elections. So this concludes my introduction. I apologize if it was a bit long, and I'm open to answering or trying to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks to you for your attention. Now there's time for your questions. While you're all very welcome here today, this is a press conference and we will only be taking questions from journalists. I'd therefore be grateful if you could begin by introducing yourself and your media outlet. We do have simultaneous translation, so you're welcome to put your questions in English or Serbian as you prefer. Are there any questions from the floor? Please go ahead, the lady here.
Good afternoon. My name is Ljubica Gojgić. I'm with Radio Television of Vojvodina. Mr. Zanier, I don't know if you are in a position to make a comparison with OSCE audit report from 18th of December last year, but judging from what you read out, it seems that it is basically very similar to the previous findings. This preliminary report. Could you say in overall, what is it that you noticed yesterday and before June 2nd, improvements or the further deterioration of the election procedures?
Well, let me first of all say that in ODIHR methodology, one of the imperatives is never compare different elections, because each election has to be looked at in its own context and in its own dynamics. Of course, many of the recommendations that are still on the table and for which the working group has been set up in the parliament have to do with issues that are not new, that have emerged in the past and have also been very visible during the elections in December. So the work of that working group will be the tool to address those concerns. Now, of course, the second part being making sure that they are implemented in good faith once the gaps in the legislation or the adjustments in the legislation or various electoral regulations are addressed. So there is work to be done, and as this work was not completed in any of the points, some of the problems that were seen before persisted. So this is a general consideration. Another consideration that I have is that from my perspective of what I've seen, there's still a very strong polarization at the political level. Between governmental and opposition forces. And this is also compounded by fragmentation, as you see in some part of the opposition decided to boycott elections, at least here in Belgrade. We saw also different political actors engaging in different directions. So there is, how can I say, a lack of coherence, and there is this polarization that seems to pervade the political discourse and the political dialogue. So this is why I'm saying that there is a need for a space to try to bring everybody around the table and to start a process of rebuilding relationships, looking in also the long-term interest of the citizens, and working for the good of the countries and trying to rally together issues of common interest. And this is where the international community can give a bit of a hand, but this is primarily a homework for the local actors and for local political actors.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I don't see any, in which case and move online. No, I don't see any questions online. If there are no more questions at all, we will leave it there. The report with the initial findings of the Observer mission and the press release are available in both language versions on the table as you go out, and will shortly be published on ODIHR's website, where you can find them on the Election Observation Mission page. Thanks again for your interest.